Ballast Bridge.
Oh, that's a great
1950.
picture.
That's
Your
on an
AJS.
AJS. That's going down Bray Hill in
Get you retired.
1951. Well, I was working on ships' engines in Newcastle and Glasgow, and I didn't like that much.
Governor's Bridge.
So I wrote to about 6 motorcycle companies asking them for a job, and they all turned me down. So I wrote again a month later, and this time Veloce Limited said they had a job in the experimental department.
Because I know you're a sleeve valve man.
That's right. It's a pity it didn't become more popular.
Yeah, it is.
I went to Veloce Limited and was interviewed by them, and they offered me the job. I was surprised and pleased when I found it was the racing department. And they showed me a lot of racing engines stacked up on the floor and said, these have to be overhauled. We got busy on those racing engines. They had to be stripped down because the assembly line didn't normally assemble racing engines. They just slapped them together anyhow. There were just 3 of us on the racing side, and we had to strip all the engines and find out what was wrong, how they'd been put together badly, and then take them up to the test bench and test them until they reached a certain horsepower. And then we'd take them down, and the assembly line would build them into proper races. I started in February 1948, and by the time June came around, they took me over to the Isle of Man to help with the private owners. They all wanted something doing to them, mainly make them faster. That was the first year, in 1948, they had the Clubbins racing. We attended to one of the bikes, that was a velocette owned by Ron Hazelhurst. And it had been timed all wrong. So we put it right, and he won the Clubbins race, a junior class.
Wow, that's great.
So we got the first 2 in the junior TT and the first one in the Clubbins. That was in June. In September they had the Manx Grand Prix, which was more for amateurs, and they sent me over for that, and I worked hard on the private entries. We did fairly well there. I forget exactly what, but we kept the flag flying. 1949 came around. The boss had redesigned parts of the motors, but they were still pretty fast. And we won in 1949 TT as well. In 1950, we were still on top, but the AGS and the Nortons were getting closer. We still won the TT and did well in the Manx. When 1951 came around, and our boss really redesigned the engine, put all his new ideas into it. His new ideas weren't very good because we lost all the races that year.
That's terrible.
But I entered for the Manx. My first race, I bought a KTT and entered it. I was very surprised to find I was in 3rd position. My boss said, oh, you did very well. And I wanted to get a 500 to race in the senior, but I didn't have any money. So I said to him, would you lend me one of those old 500s in the back of the shop for the next Manx? He said, no. Too many people think they can ride a 500 just because they've done well on a 350. But I just had to get a 500 somehow. I said, why don't we put 2 of those KTT engines together, side by side. Two of them each picked up a 350 and put it side by side in the frame that was standing there. It was much too wide, so I figured it couldn't be done. But I wasn't so sure. I thought, well, if I cut off the bevel drive, the overhead cam,
Yes, sir.
and make a chain drive instead, maybe I could do it. I bought two 350 scrap crankcases and took them home and put them on my lathe and turned off the bevel housing. That way I could get them closer together. And I figured chain drive right between the two cylinders. Just before the Manx, I ran and bumped it and it started up all right. I thought, oh, that's good. So I took the 500 I just built and my other 350, took them over to the Isle of Man in September. I took the 500 I built out for practice and it was all right. It was a bit slow. I wasn't expecting much. And I figured that it was probably because I was using straight through pipes as against the megaphone. So I cut off the pipe short and put two megaphones on. And I took it out for the last practice. Well, it went like hell.
Oh, that's...
Much faster than the Nortons. They put the AJS man right at the front of the start. You know, we go off in 10-second intervals. He was right at the front, and by the time it came to my turn, I was right at the back, and he was halfway around the circuit by then. I had to stop for a fill-up, and he didn't, so the result was he caught me on my fifth lap and his sixth lap, and he was on his last lap, and he zoomed past me, and I don't remember any of this, but somehow or other I got off the line and crashed badly.
Oh.
And landed in hospital. I got a broken thigh and torn up face. They had me back at Velocettes as a race mechanic for a year. And at the end of the year, the boss called me in and gave me a week's notice. He said, I expect you want to know why, don't you? Oh. He hadn't been too friendly lately, so anyway, I said, okay. He said, it was that bike you made last year. You must have been thinking about it all the time. So it took your attention from the works bikes. That's why we didn't win any races last year.
Awesome.
That's a sleeve valve between.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is Hedley cock on it. Sleeve valve engine. 500cc sleeve valve. It's mounted in a Honda VT 500. There it is, right there. Sleeve valve engine, 500cc in a Honda VT 500. Invented by and registered by Hedley Cox.